Hey, quoi de neuf et bienvenue à cette vidéo. In here we'll be looking at French writing, why it's complicated, and what can and can't be done about it. To those concerned, no, this isn't a replacement of a language overview on French. That'll happen at some point in the future. This video will be like the video on English spelling, that was my YouTube debut. So, allons. To start off, I must admit that French is actually not as bad as English when it comes to spelling. The reason why is very simple. After you learn many rules of French writing, you'll almost always be able to pronounce a word that you're reading. This is unlike how there are tons of spelling exceptions in English that make rules somewhat non-existent and that make heteronyms a thing. In French, there are almost no questions as to how a word is pronounced, which makes it a fundamentally better orthography than English, as scripts are made to accurately depict their respective spoken languages. Or about the accurate depiction thing. One may think that the silent consonants at the ends of some French words are just there for historical reasons and have no actual function in the word. However, there are certain times in which those consonants get pronounced and therefore need to be present in the written form. One of these is when adjectives need to be feminine. Take the word you've probably heard before, petit, which means small. This is the masculine form, and notice the silent T. When it agrees with a feminine noun, it's petite. The T is pronounced, and you can tell by the silent E that got added. Now, some of y'all might be thinking, why not just take off the T for the masculine? So let's look at the word for big, gros. Notice that it has an S at the end. In the feminine, it's grosse. Therefore, if the T or the S weren't there at the end of each masculine word respectively, we would have no idea how to make the word feminine. Side note for clarification, by we, I mean non-native speakers of French. It's all natural to native French speakers, so we should consider this aspect of French orthography a bit of charity from them to us. Going with this is the French written grammatical rule that in the passé composé with avoir, if a direct object comes before the verb in past participle form has to agree with the object in gender and number. At first glance, this seems like a cruel way to make writing harder, specifically for the past participles that end with vowels, as there is no difference whatsoever in pronunciation based on gender. However, it very much does matter if the past participle ends with a consonant, as native French speakers naturally pronounce that consonant in speech when the object of the sentence is feminine. L'Académie determined that the pattern had to be kept and represented equally in writing, which is why the rule is applied to all past participles in this situation. Anyway, t and s aren't the only sounds that become silent at the end of words. Any of these consonants can behave like t and s, albeit with some special cases like how n nasalizes the vowel before it. In addition to feminine words, those silent letters are also pronounced, much of the time, when the following word begins with a vowel in a process known as liaison. The easiest examples to come up with are, of course, the word les followed by anything else. What I'm talking about is les filles and les garçons as opposed to les ados and les enfants. Of course, it also happens in sentences whenever the situation is right, so they deserve existence. Unfortunately, with all that said, there are some things that French orthography does less than well on, so it's story time. Last year, I was in French class, and we were studying reflexive verbs and fairy tales. An example sentence was put on the smartboard. Méfiez-vous-en, le loup arrive. Or something along those lines, meaning, watch out, the wolf is coming. If you've caught the points made already today, you'll see where I got confused concerning the pronunciation. I asked my teacher something like, Pourquoi vous n'avez pas prononcé le peu à la fin de loup? Le mot prochain commence avec une voyelle. To which she responded something like, Le mot loup ne suit pas la liaison, c'est pas une règle universelle. And then, noticing the bewildered look on my face, she dropped the harsh truth on me. Il n'y a pas de système. My point with this story is, of course, that irregulars based on etymology like this can be removed. Unlike the silent letters that get pronounced with liaison, letters such as the P and LU can be deleted with no harm done. Also having to do with liaison, H's at the beginning of words are always silent. However, some of them, called misleadingly aspirated H's, negate liaison of silent letters before them. Not all initial H's do this. The obvious fix to this is to remove all non-aspirated initial H's from the orthography, to make it evident that liaison happens in those cases, making H the universal French liaison negator. Now about a possible improvement to the liaison-affected letters that need to be there. It is possible to make them superscript when they're silent, but enlarge them when they get pronounced. This could also be used to render silent E's obsolete, as the normal-sized letters would be used in the feminine, but it would take some time to get used to, as it's really not that pleasing to the eyes. Outside of silent letters entirely, other improvements could happen to French writing. One point I was all in on in the video about English orthography was the large amount of vowels. French is another language whose vowels the Latin script doesn't do justice to. Phonetically, French has 12 non-nasal vowels and 4 nasal vowels, making 16 total vowels. For now, the French digraphs are doing fine, but I do admit that it's a bit confusing. Where I get most annoyed with this system is actually not in French itself, but it's when languages of places previously colonized by France choose to use OU to transliterate their OO sound rather than just U like Britain's former colonies. I remember pronouncing a lot of those names with a strong O until learning French and realizing it's OO. Future French could add more individual written vowels to combat this problem. It could even adopt the IPA standard of putting a tilde over nasal vowels. To close the video, il y a beaucoup de choses à faire pour améliorer l'orthographe française, mais c'est pas aussi mal que laquelle d'anglais. La vérité est que seulement ceux d'entre nous qui parlent français nativement ont la puissance de changer quelques parties de la langue française, incluant l'orthographe. C'est leur choix et nous y mettons toute notre confiance. Pour le reste de nous, il faut simplement apprécier la beauté de cette langue compliquée et le fait que les lettres silencieuses existent à cause de la bienfaisance des Français. Merci pour regarder, aimez si c'est le cas, abonnez-vous et cliquez sur la cloche pour être informé quand je télécharge une nouvelle vidéo. Et si vous connaissez français, écrivez dans les commentaires comment vous changerez l'orthographe française. Au revoir!